Hello, everybody. We will be starting just momentarily in about 4 to 5 minutes. So if you are hanging out, please keep on hanging out. And if not, don't worry about it because you won't hear this. Welcome, any and all, to Views in Paradox. This is our fourth episode with the new title, and we're happy to be back. Still hanging out in quarantine. I am your host, John Olson, and I'm joined once more by my ever faithful co host, Rochelle Racine.
Hello, hello. Happy 70th day in quarantine.
Oh my goodness.
Oh wow, counting.
That's a lot. And we did a few episodes, just the two of us, and then we thought that maybe if we ever have a disastrous episode, it'd be nice to have a scapegoat. So we're bringing guests back on, and we went with a good one. He's been here before. If you saw which episode were you on? Which movie did you do this?
Which one was that?
Oh, why can't I think of it?
I know, we're terrible. I can't remember our own show. Anyway, without further ado, Bruce Gale, welcome. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure to be back. I'm happy to be your scapegoat.
Yeah. I think this will be a good one, though. Before we get into the film, I just want to address a small controversy that I misspelled controversy on last week's episode. I misspelled controversial twice. This is just, all I can say is this is what happens when you use programs without spell check.
And when you've been locked in your house for 70 days.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if I type it into Google Docs, it'll be like, no, that's wrong. But if I type into YouTube, it's like, write whatever you want. We don't care.
Who caught it, John? Did you catch it or something?
No, our loyal followers were kind enough to call me out on it. I haven't. I could change it, but I haven't bothered. We'll just live with our flaws, I guess.
It is what it is.
I just wanted to address it because I didn't respond to any of the comments. I was just like, oh.
It's the essential human condition.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know if our commenters actually watched the episode, but they definitely caught what I was doing there. So anyway, this week's film we watched was Knives Out by director Rian Johnson. Rochelle, you want to give us the recap on this one, or the setup on this one?
Why, yes, I would absolutely love to. So, as usual, mild and eventually full spoilers. And the director is by Rian Johnson. He's also the writer, cinematographer. Please forgive me on the pronunciation of this last name, Steve Yedlin. It is a crime dramedy, comedic drama, and a detective investigates the death of the patriarch of an eccentric, combative family.
Yeah, it's kind of a comedy thriller.
Yeah.
Right?
It was, when I was like
thriller-y?
people where they put this under, it was all over the place. And so I just made my own up.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to define
Yeah.
its exact genre. It's kind of, I think Rian Johnson likes to play things that way. Just as a director, like, it's like he plays into genre, but then he also just likes to like throw something at it that's very different.
It gives an edge almost. So, real quick, the patriarch, or Harlan, he dies at the age of 85. This is like right in the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really cool Easter egg, because that was the time or age that Agatha Christie died.
Yeah, it's a nice one.
So it's a tribute to her, and if you're familiar with her writing, she's very into like mystery. So
yeah, and this film wears its influences on its sleeve, right?
Right.
Like Agatha Christie, Columbo, Poirot, like those are all very much like the director's clearly very aware of all those things and kind of playing with our just the fact that we've probably seen a lot of those things before, right?
Right.
You guys think it has sort of a film noir element to it as well?
A little bit. Not as much as some of his other stuff, I would say, though. It, like, if you compare it to like Brick or Looper, it's a much lighter film than like those are. But he also did like Brothers Bloom, which is very kind of tonally similar to this movie. Maybe that one's actually more dramatic.
Real quick, let's get the awards and nominations. So,
oh, sure.
Total awards won around all like film festivals. So this is like obscure ones as well that you've never heard of. 45 wins.
Always fun.
Nominations. The ones that you have heard of: Academy Awards, nomination for Best Screenplay, Golden Globes, nomination for Best Motion Picture, Comedy, Best Performance, by an actress, Ana de Armas. You go, girl! You just got yourself a #1 fan, and also nominated for Best Actor Daniel Craig, and then BAFTA nominee Best Screenplay.
Yeah. So the film kind of opens with a like Law and Order style opening where we discover the body, which I feel like has to be a nod to Law and Order, but maybe a lot of them do it, I guess. But every single Law and Order episode opens that way. And then, yeah, and then we very quickly cut to the point of view of Ana de Armas's character, Marta, who is like our protagonist, our central point of view character, and we learn pretty quickly that she's his nurse. She's like, she doesn't live there, right?
No.
She visits regularly to help him with his what does he have? It's not diabetes, right? It's because it's not insulin shots. He's got some kind of condition that she's helping him with, though.
If I recall, those shots it's because he had recently hurt his shoulder.
Right.
So she was only there originally like 15 hours a week. So whatever he had obviously wasn't too debilitating. But she ended up spending more time there because he was lonely and his family are pieces of crap.
Right. Yeah. So and it's
she befriended him. She befriended him.
Yeah, she befriended him, and it's a big cast. The family is a big family, and the murder, of course, happens on a night when the whole family is gathered in their big, Clue-esque, Addams Family-esque house, which they definitely reference that it's like a Clue board at one point, and the house is, you get to know the house pretty well, like. I feel like you really it's a simple structure, but the layout matters enough for the plot that you really kind of get to know it.
Well, the house itself was sort of a character in the movie. I thought,
Yeah.
The opening sequence was on the house before we ever got to any of the inhabitants.
Right. And the house is definitely an extension of Christopher Plummer's character, I think. Right? He's like this ominous presence over the whole family. And like, even though he's dead, like the house is still very much, I think, representing kind of his personality. We learn that he is a writer of murder mysteries, as it would turn out. So the film kind of immediately starts getting a little bit meta from right kind of off the bat with that. And the first major sequence of the film is after the funeral. We've learned that the funeral's happened, and we get some police detectives that want to interview the family one by one, right? So let's get into this sequence, because this is kind of a hefty sequence of the film where we get to know the family, and we learn about kind of all the stuff that we've just kind of laid out right here. You have some thoughts on this, right, Rochelle?
Yeah, well, first of all, I thought it was way too long.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really did. And I'm like a really big procedural television show watcher, so like Law and Order and things like that. And it was a lot. I think it could have been shortened, but I did like it, of course. One thing that really stood out to me was that the detective Benoit, he would keep pressing on the piano key throughout each individual's.
Yeah, he would like interrupt just to like have them move on with the questioning.
Yeah,
right?
It was really interesting. And so naturally I was like, why is he doing that?
Did you find anything? Like, is that a reference?
Yep, there is a reference. So there was kind of a lot of debate as to what it was. So some people were saying that he was doing that because they were recording the interrogation, of course. And he would do that to remind himself that like this part of the interview is extremely important and to go back to it.
It felt like the opposite of that to me. It felt like this is where things are, because every time he would do it, the detectives, the main detective, who's from, oh my goodness, of all the times I have a brain fart, he's like from Sorry to Bother You and other films. He would like then all right, he would like move on and like, let's get to the next point.
Right.
That's interesting. I always thought it was Benoit's his registering of like, I don't believe this. I don't believe this.
Yeah, like bullshit.
There was a
Bullshit.
lot-
Yeah, I wasn't gonna use the shit word, but
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I don't know if we have kids watching, but
I'd
right.
have to.
That's exactly that's exactly right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of debate on what this meant. So some people think it was like Blanc's signal to the other detectives, because Detective Blanc is more of like a sleuth and like a private investigator than he is like a police.
Yeah. So for context, if you haven't seen it, there's two police detectives, and as they're interviewing the people, we notice and are kind of pointed out that there's another man behind them. And this is Daniel Craig's character, Detective Benoit Blanc, our would-be Poirot. And in kind of Agatha Christie fashion, he's very charactery. like one thing, like I watched the more recent Kenneth Branagh Poirot movie. What was that? The Murder on the Orient Express.
Express, right? Yeah.
And I was struck by just like what a ridiculous character the detective is, and that is kind of a trope in these detective movies, that they're always kind of quirky, and so he definitely fits that bill of being kind of bizarre. But he's like, as the police are investigating, we learn that he's a hired outsider. He's a consultant essentially for the police. So that's how like the modern dynamic works.
But he was
John, can I
hired
toss in
on
something about it? Oh, I'm sorry. Can I toss in something about Benoit's name? I like the origins of names.
Sure.
And so I thought, well, Benoit clearly, is probably from the New Orleans area. But Benoit is from the Latin Benedictine, which means blessed. But in the Urban Dictionary, it means nice, sweet, trustworthy, but can be a pain in the ass. And I thought, well, that really fits this guy.
That does. He's
I thought the same thing about New Orleans. I think I even put that in our notes somewhere.
Yeah.
his accent doesn't sound particularly New Orleans though.
That was
Yeah.
another thing that got a lot of heat. So what he was doing with the piano
Yeah.
key, a lot of debate, and then his accent had a lot of debate. So I wanted to ask our voice actor, Bruce, what did you think of his accent?
Well, I have to say, I actually enjoyed his accent. In fact, I was impressed that, that not only is he doing an American accent, but he's doing a, Southern American accent.
Mm.
There were times where, the accent was lost. He would drop the accent. But I was very forgiving of him for that, because I think he was able to maintain that character of who he was playing in the movie, the Southern gentleman, kind of the slow drawl. And whether it was completely accurate or not, it didn't matter to me. So I loved what he was doing with it.
He based his style of speech on a few different figures. However, the most prominent one that he used as inspiration was the Southern historian Shelby Foote. Now, I haven't taken the time to go compare them myself yet, but I assume that, that she doesn't have that typical Southern drawl that like most people's sense of place goes to when they think of a Southern thing.
Yeah, I was trying to place it. Like my brain kept going to like, I don't know, like Kentucky or like one of the northern southern states, kind of somewhere in that region. It doesn't really matter. I enjoyed it. I thought that it added nicely to kind of his humor. And like
I liked that it wasn't so like Southern in your face, because like it made it easier to follow, and it made it easier for me to take him seriously,
Yeah.
And the persona of the Southern gentleman is really what I felt in his accent, and
I also think it might be somewhat of a kind of a thematic contrast to just like we're kind of depicting this rich white family in a fairly negative light. And so like to kind of balance that out, we have like this Southern white guy who's kind of coming in and being a decent person. It's I feel like it was his kind of an attempt to even things out and just kind of like add a little fairness into not sort of painting with a giant broad brush. And this is a predominantly white cast, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about the politics of it. in just a little bit. But I do think that might have been a factor in why he cast him that way. I liked the whole interview sequence. My 2 cents on that is that I think that it was really nicely sort of written and shot to edit. Like, I really enjoyed the way they transitioned from interview to interview, where you have this kind of Archer like transition from one conversation to another. My favorite being the Jamie Lee Curtis to her husband, where she's like, if you think I'm gonna say anything, like, you got nothing
Yes,
come,
yes.
and then he's just spilling his guts about everything. He's just dishing on everything.
Yeah, that was marvelous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. That was very enjoyable.
There was some nice contrast, and I think we get to know the cast, and it is definitely a cast where, like, in traditional fashion, everyone is a suspect. So, it's like it really could have gone without spoiling it. It could have gone the Murder on the Orient Express way, where, like, everyone's got a motive. Spoiler alert for that movie, but it's like 100-year-old book, so. But, like, everybody's in it, right? So I thought that was nice, and, like, kind of getting to know their individual motives. For me, it didn't draw too long. I enjoyed it. I thought that the editing kind of kept it moving. It's definitely always a trick getting through exposition, and this movie is, like, heavy on character exposition specifically. So I thought that this was a nice way to, like, start getting to each family member, because there are a couple of mini arcs with some of these side characters too. Notably Jamie Lee Curtis, as kind of, like, she's not the matriarch, but she's kind of the first among the children.
Yes.
So she's the daughter. There are what, three children, three direct children of Christopher Plummer. There's, like, this. There's Jamie Lee Curtis.
Right.
There's here, I'm gonna pull up the IMDb real quick just so I can.
Handsome, and then the guy with the cane.
Yeah, who's great, Michael Shannon. Michael Shannon, who's always great.
Yes.
And, like, very, very well cast here. Yeah, so there's, like, the three main children, and then
Right.
they have kids, and there's, like, a woman who married in, but her husband's no longer part of it, and she still
Right.
hangs out with the family.
And sucks off their teeth.
Yeah, and she's just, like, she's living that leech life. She's hooked up with a rich billionaire.
Cracked me up because it was like, this movie's kind of like meant to, like,
Yeah.
exude older style film, but then, like, it's set in modern day, and so she was like an influencer, and, like, she was just cracking me up.
And Toni Collette is just, like, always great.
She's marvelous. Tony.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Can't go wrong with Toni Collette. So there's just this kind of giant family, and then there's of course Marta. What's that?
And the grandkids.
Yeah, and grandkids. Yeah, there's, like, kids, grandkids.
And the mother.
Right.
Yeah.
And the mother, who is, they're like, this is Christopher Plummer's mother, and he died at 85. They're like, how old is she? And they're like, we don't know.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Nobody.
The actress was actually, I looked this up when I first watched it, like, because me and my wife, we always go through, like, the IMDb trivia after we watch stuff. And we did that, like, I did that, like, after the very first time I saw it. And she's, like, really close to Christopher Plummer's age. So they're only, like, a couple years different. I forget which one's older. She might even be younger than Christopher Plummer. But she's just, like, this, like, she looks like she's been taxidermied almost, she's got this, like, big high
Embalmed, John, is that what you're saying?
yeah, and she got, like, very minimal motions.
Yeah.
She does, though, right? She's kind of just a fixture. She doesn't really speak,
Hard
but
of hearing, like the typical elderly.
it's hard to tell if she's even hard of hearing, because she just has a lack of response to things.
Yeah,
But
the acting to do that, to be so still, to have very few lines, yet she communicated volumes in terms of just the way she would stare and the occasional utterance that would come out of her mouth. There was so much more going on underneath the surface
Yeah.
than you would see.
Completely.
And she was used to great comedic effect throughout the film, but she also does become important a bit later on, a bit later on in the film. Um, so before we move on, I just want to get to the stakes. So there's like he's an author, but more than that, he runs a publishing company, and so there's kind of a lot at stake. There's a whole publishing business that seems to primarily run on his novels, but I must imagine that there's others in the works. Um, and we start learning that there was a bit of discord. So on the night of the murder, so the night of the murder was actually his birthday. There's a big party. One of the things I loved is whenever and we do a lot of flashbacks as they're talking. One of the things I loved was how every time they cut to the party with the cake coming down, there's like this motif of them giving him his birthday cake. He's always surrounded by different like people. Like everybody is pretending to be the one who's right next to him. Uh, and I kind of liked just that visualization of their inconsistency in storytelling. It's a nice way of telling us that they're inconsistent without giving us even more exposition, right?
Right.
Um,
I didn't notice that.
I didn't either. It's very good, John. Yeah.
right,
But it also talks about personal memory and witnesses. You know, when you have a witness to a crime,
right.
everybody has a different view, you know?
Yeah.
It's true, and we all kind of remember things subjectively,
Yeah.
so it makes sense. But that was a nice touch. It's kind of subtle, but we cut to it like 3 different times, and each time he's got 2 different people on his shoulder. Everybody was, just so close to him, right? So, and finally, we have the nurse, and we learn that there is a kind of special quirk that she has. That the family has discovered about her, that she cannot lie. And I want to get you guys' read on this. So whenever she lies, she has the uncontrollable impulse to projectile vomit. um, and Daniel Craig seeks to use this to get some more accurate information than he's been getting from the rest of the family. What did you guys make of the whole vomit, can't lie?
I thought it was brilliant. It's like, who thinks of this stuff? I loved it.
I agree. It made me really uncomfortable just because me as a human being, I have like issues with bodily fluids. So like it took a couple times for me to be like, okay, this is okay.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that if you like even pretend to vomit, they just like can't handle it. My wife's kind of like that, where it's like I'll just like mess her. She's like, don't you do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do it.
But what a brilliant device to use her as the foil, as the barometer for Daniel Craig to sleuth out the truth. I loved it.
Yeah, so now he's got this kind of something he can kind of use as what's the word I'm looking for? Like a control. He's got like a control group, right? In her, and he quickly wields this ability just to learn that some of the family members have been lying about sort of ancillary evidence.
Well, it's like getting the family to take a lie detector test without, hooking them up to one.
Right.
We don't have to go that kind of intense. And like, would the family even agree to such a thing? This is a nice workaround with that. And so it makes her more important, but she seems more than a little hesitant to talk to Daniel Craig, not just because he's trying to make her vomit, it would seem. She just seems kind of just very on edge from the moment that we meet her. Rochelle?
I wanted to say one of the reasons I thought. So there's more to this that I will get into later, but one of the reasons I thought that she was on edge was because I thought that she was the other woman that Jamie Lee Curtis's husband was cheating with.
Mm.
Yeah, that crossed my mind too.
Yeah, because we learned he's having an affair.
Yeah.
Don Johnson.
Long dark hair in the photos, and then like her reaction to when Harlan discovered it and she was there. It just
Yeah.
Yeah.
there was no really reaction.
I didn't
like
catch that, but that is kind of a nice misdirect,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So here we're gonna pick up the spoilers a little bit. We'll go into what we'll call mild spoilers. We're not gonna give away the killer or anything just yet. We're just gonna, but the movie takes kind of a big turn near the early middle. And so I just wanted to give a heads up to anybody who hasn't seen it that we are going to start spoiling it a little bit more and more. Hopefully you've seen it already, and that's not even a problem. So yeah, the first twist, right? We get Marta. Marta gets interviewed, and we know that she can't lie. And he asks her what happens, and before she answers, we go to the flashback of the night that she was with him. And we've seen kind of a lot of beating around the, like, kind of what Christopher Plummer was going through, as you would expect. And then it takes us right to the night of the murder. And we learned that she is like, she's playing Go with him, and she's hanging out with him, and she's kind of giving him his evening medicines. And then she gives him one dose that's like medication, and then they're talking about doing morphine. And like Christopher Plummer's all about it.
She gives him an injectable anti-inflammatory, and then the morphine is only supposed to be 3 milligrams, and that is to help him sleep.
Right. It's just to kind of, take the edge off. They call it the good
but he
stuff.
did wonder why he waited his whole life to discover more.
Yeah, he's like, why did I wait so long? Morphine's so great.
Side note, I've only had morphine once. I got stung by a stingray, and you guys, it's magic. Let me tell you. So I see him. And
don't do it recreationally, people.
Don't
do it.
No endorsement.
No endorsements for morphine.
I was like, agree with you, Harlan. The anti-inflammatory was 100 milligrams he was given. So I think this is just like an important detail to keep. So
yeah.
Morphine 3 milligrams. Yeah. Anti-inflammatory was 100 milligrams. Huge difference.
I mean, I understand that.
What do you think of the repartee between Marta and that? I thought I enjoyed. It was fun watching them sort of banter back and forth. This very young girl, this much older man. Just the friendship and the warmth of sort of a daughter.
They felt like real friends. I think I bought it that they were actually friends. I thought they had good chemistry on camera. Christopher Plummer's great. And he's really good in this movie. I think he's very endearing in this movie. And I think part of the reason he's so endearing is because we are in Marta's point of view. So I agree with you. I liked it. I thought it was nice. We learned that Marta is like better at him than Go. There's a lot of little details. He complains about the family. It's like, it's clear that he likes her better than his own family, right?
Yeah.
So she injects him with morphine, and then she has this moment where she looks at the vials and she's like, "Oh shit, I gave you the morphine first. I gave you 300 milligrams or something," right? And he's like, "Oh, that's not good." And then he immediately is like, he does something very bizarre, right? She's like, "We got to call an ambulance and get you to the hospital." And he's like, "They won't make it in time. Like, this shit is deadly." And he seems very adamant, and we don't learn why right away. We'll get to that in a little bit. But he like directs her to lie about it, essentially. And I liked the moment. I really liked the moment where she's telling him, like, he asks like, "What's gonna happen to me?" And she's like, "In 10 minutes you're gonna just like collapse and die," essentially. Yeah. And he immediately like takes out his his little notebook, and he's like, "Oh, this is a good idea for a murder." Like he's just like immediately writing a story. I mean, at that point, he seems to think that they'll be fine because she mentions actually that she has an antidote, like a counteractive drug that comes with the kit, and she can't find it anywhere. And like while she's looking for that, he's like just chilling. But then she can't find it, and so it's like, oh crap, I'm gonna die. And he's like, we're gonna stage this, like it's a murder, but we're gonna make sure that you aren't the suspect.
No, like it's a suicide.
Like a suicide.
That's right. So we're gonna do it like it's a suicide, and we just have to kind of get you out of here and clear you. And so he has her leave the house, and then backtrack around. I love. What's that?
Very convoluted.
Very convoluted. I mean, he's like, he's a mystery writer. He likes probably convoluted plots and stuff. But he's clearly been doing it for a long time because he thinks his plan really quickly.
Yeah, right.
It was shocking, actually.
Yeah, and we do see that he does slit his own throat. And Marta like witnesses it before running out, and she's just like freaking out as you do.
She's a little bit horrified.
Yeah, I love when she's trying to follow his instructions, and there's the moment with the car, and he's like, make sure you turn off before the statue. Make sure you turn off after the statue. But be after for the statue. Like her brain just
can't. And she's remembering it, right?
Yeah, her brain just can't remember which it is. And of course she picks wrong. Right. Because there's like a camera. And so she like announces that she's leaving kind of loudly, and then she circles back around. What does she have to do in the house? I'm like brain farting.
She has to pretend that she's Harlan and come down into like the...
That's right. She has to put on his robe.
Right.
And just be seen through a dirty window. Like the house, like the dad knows the house so well that he's like, there's a dirty window. Make sure that you're seen through that, and then go back upstairs and then sneak out so that you've got the airtight, I was alive, you were gone kind of alibi. And she's like, I can't lie. I'm trying to remember now. I watched this like 2 days ago. You'd think I would remember what she says to get out of it, because it cuts back. It brings us back, and we have this moment of like, how's she gonna deal with this lie? And she just he tells her to just say the things about the night that were true, and we kind of see her do that. Right. She like walks that line of truth lying, where like clearly she's uncomfortable, but apparently
it's lying through omission, but the omission part doesn't seem to.
Yeah, she doesn't vomit over omission. Yeah. She only vomits from direct lies.
No, she vomits after the interrogation.
The dishonesty was too much. That's right.
Definitely.
I forgot.
Yeah, she runs to the bathroom after and vomits.
Yeah, there's a couple times where she manages to like hold. There's 3 times actually. And yeah, this is the first time where she kind of manages to keep together long enough to vomit elsewhere. So we know that
she was walking that line.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually a good setup, because we know that she can kind of like hold it in for just a little bit. But it's got to come out, it's the poison, the lies, the dishonesty. And then Daniel Craig is like, all right, Marta, you're going to join me on my expedition because I trust you. Or so he tells us. And so then they start like investigating, right? And she's trying to sort of cover herself up along the way. I think this turn is, for me, kind of what makes the movie unique and refreshing compared to other similar movies. I mean, I like a good whodunit, but this I thought was a nice turn just because it kind of takes the burden off of the viewer to guess. It changes the stakes. Like, it doesn't raise the stakes, it changes them. Because we understand that Benoit is Poirot, the detective that always gets the case, right? And so now it becomes this sort of, can she get away with it? It's not, we're not from his point of view where he has to figure out who. We apparently know who, and we have to figure out if she can still kind of get away with it. And I like that it changed those stakes. It gave us, like, it just kind of changes the way that you typically watch one of these films.
Although it's interesting, John. When that shift occurred, I was wondering as I watched it, is he really buying it? He seemed to accept her the fact that okay, she can't lie, she'll throw up if she lies. But I was wondering, is he really accepting the fact that she is no longer a suspect, or just kind of temporarily setting it aside?
Right. And he's very hard to read, right?
Yeah.
Michelle?
I definitely thought he was just setting it aside. I thought, okay, this is like a really great, she's a great barometer for this.
Mm-hmm.
And because she's kind of like, she's the help. And so they know a lot more than they put off at the end of the day because they see the inner workings of the family. So I think that he just saw the value in having her as an assistant, so to speak.
Yeah.
And John, you reminded me too. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm done.
Okay. And John, you reminded me how Benoit described how he solves the case, that he follows the arc. I love that description. Follows the arc of the facts too. And it's terminus. I think
it's inevitable. Yeah, and it's like it's an inevitable, right?
Yes.
It will it always leads me exactly to the truth. And he tells that to Anna, of course, or Marta, as her character name is. And God, I lost my train of thought. But so the investigation kind of continues along these lines for a while, where we, she's trying to kind of cover up all these little things. We find there's like these dogs on the premise who are mildly important clue wise, but they bring him a clue of like a broken thing, and it's clear he's like, oh, this is part of the house.
Right.
A broken trellis. Which, if you guys don't know what that is, it's like a wooden structure that vines can grow up of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a siding for the house so that it can look old timey. And they see a window and they're like, where's that window? And there's like a hallway with a painting at the end on the upper floor, but there's a door that opens to a window. And we learned from one of the police detectives, who it turns out is a fan of the books, that this is a thing from one of his books. So clearly, like, the house continues to reflect Christopher Plummer and just like his own love of murder mysteries. Like, if there's an afterlife, he's enjoying watching the murder mystery unfold. His own, right? So
I felt like he was excited to get there. Like when he was learning he was going to die, he was like, "Oh, I'll just handle this myself then."
yeah.
I'm going to want to be an audience for this.
I know, right? And like, so Benoit just keeps finding clues. They go to the tape where her car is, and she like finds a way to like erase the tape magnetic. They're like these old, like, she just kind of puts a magnet on it because they are VHS tapes. And thus, what is that?
Degaussed it.
Degaussed it.
Yes.
Nice, good word. So we kind of go through all that, and then we come upon sort of our next big pivotal moment that we wanted to talk about, which is the reading of the will. So the family has like gathered for the reading of the will. That's really why they're here, and they're just kind of been humoring the detectives. We also are introduced to the one family member that was never interviewed, and this is a grandson of the patriarch of Harlan, and played by Chris Evans, who's clearly having a lot of fun. He's just...
He's your typical trust fund baby playboy, like doesn't work and just like spends grandpa's money.
Yeah, just an asshole. Like, like from the get. Like he just walks right in and just like,
Yeah.
and
I gotta say, hold on, I gotta give his car a shout out. I'm Persian and I just can't let a beautiful white BMW go without acknowledgement. So he drives a 1972 BMW 3.0 CSI. And if you don't know
gorgeous
what that
car.
is, oh, it's a beautiful car.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
I know. I love that scene with
Oh,
the
I didn't
car
know there was
chase.
a Persian thing. That's cool.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
like the car chase where he's like, I should have bought the Beamer.
Right.
Yeah. Just to let you know, Bruce, we have Iranians have a stereotype that we like white BMWs or white Mercedes, and it's true.
I did not know this stereotype. You learn something new every day.
Very true. I'm embarrassed.
Though now that I think,
Oh, we went-
what it was BMW or what was the other one?
Mercedes.
Mercedes. Okay. I was
like
thinking
that.
about Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, where they're like trying to get help from the like Arab guys, and all he wants is a Rolls Royce. He's like the Rolls Royce Phantom 3. You know, he's just
Well, if we're in a higher tax bracket, then yes, we want a white.
then the Rolls.
But your typical like middle class, upper middle class Iranian.
There's a hierarchy of Mercedes and
Right.
BMW.
The Rolls is it's pretty lofty, right?
Yeah.
They're kind of
But they
rare.
gotta be white.
They gotta be white. I didn't know. Desert colors. It reflect, this way it doesn't get too hot in the car and way out in the
It makes
desert.
sense.
So at the reading of the will, we get the family together, and Benoit gives us this thing where like, these things aren't usually all that eventful, but of course this is the exception that proves the rule, as he says later. We learn that nobody has inherited anything except for Marta. And this kind of immediately explains why Harlan. I'm sorry, I do that all the time with the actors and the characters. But this kind of explains why Harlan was so adamant that she not get accused for killing him, because he had like just updated his will. We learned like 2 weeks prior or something, just very recently. Maybe even a week. It's like a week.
It was a week.
Yeah, a week.
Yesterday, basically,
Yeah, a week prior, he had changed his will to leave everything to Marta, and like the family just turns on her.
And what I found funny about this was like throughout the film, in the beginning, during the interrogations, and just like throughout, they're like, "Oh yeah, she's family, and then they were, obviously, so quick to turn on her when she was the beneficiary. And like a running joke up to this point was that they would call her family, but no one knew where she was from.
Yeah, do we want to talk about that right now? Because I do think that scene came before this, right?
That was like punctuated throughout.
Oh yeah, no, the thing you're talking about where they can't decide on her nationality is a running sort of gag throughout the film.
Some from Ecuador, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, like it was just so funny. And like no one ever thought to ask her. They were doing it right in front of her. And they, even though they said that she was family, they treated her like the help. Like there was even like a scene in the when they were like what is that called?
It's like a sitting room. It's like a fireplace room.
They're like mourning. I want to say sitting shiva, but they're not.
It's like a wake.
But like they're like in there, having
it's a wake, right?
A wake. There we go.
Yeah, wait, yeah.
She gets handed plates, and even though she's a nurse, they're treating her like the maid.
Well, that scene in particular. So let's talk about that scene for a little bit, because it's clearly the most politically charged scene in the whole movie, which has mild sort of commentary throughout, but that scene like really hones in on it, where they're having a debate about the current political scheme as of when this movie came out. So not coronavirus, but they are talking about our current president. We mentioned kids in cages, and there's kind of this like, I feel like this is a conversation I can relate to, actually, where it's like the family is having this very like diametrically opposed conversation about being sort of liberal versus conservative. Right. And Don Johnson's character is, he's kind of being defensive, and he's like using Marta as an example of like how inviting they are. And he's like, your parents came here and they did it right and they did it good.
They did it legally.
They did it legally.
Yes.
Take my plate, even though you were.
And then he hands her the plate, and she's
Yeah.
not even a maid. She's
Yeah.
like she's the nurse.
A registered nurse.
Yeah.
Like not like a registered nurse. Like
And even the way he handed her the plate, he didn't look at her. He just kind of held it.
Yeah,
off
he
to the
just
side,
like it's like
with the assumption she should take it. Yes.
yeah. So you can kind of it really highlights. We learned that his son is like posting alt-right materials online, and they all kind of call him a little Nazi kid. I do like the scene they talk about how he overheard something in the bathroom, like when the little Nazi kid was masturbating in the bathroom. They're so kind of brutal. He says very little. He does call her an anchor baby at one point. Improv. I mean, it's in character, right? It's a good improv.
A few things he said. He was like in his phone, a typical millennial the whole time, just like
Right. Yeah.
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 very few words.
Yeah, just being assumably or presumably vitriolic on his phone while doing this. So I wanted to talk about the scene just because it is so like overt, and you don't get a lot of that. Like I kind of feel two ways about it a little bit, and I was curious kind of how you guys felt, just because I don't usually like being preached to in movies. On the one hand, even when it's something I agree with. And on the other hand, I feel like it's a very bold thing to throw in your film. In a time where Hollywood films typically like try to please everybody and not make political statements and like just kind of keep that keep the really current hot button debates out of your film, for fear it will polarize audiences. And in this scene in particular, Rian Johnson just kind of throws that out the window and like doesn't care. He did this very notably in Star Wars with sort of he did The Last Jedi, and there's a scene where they want to like free all the animals. And Rose gets very like she goes kind of PETA on us, where she wants to like free the Star Wars animals. So he's clearly got a very openly liberal bent, and I was just kind of curious where you guys landed on just that in film and kind of in this.
Bruce, do you want to go first while I collect my thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, you know what? I didn't have a feeling of being preached to because they were throwing these accusations at each other. So it was very much in character, part of the dialogue, and yet as they're having this debate and throwing these accusations at each other, the real crux of it in my mind is these were a bunch of white, over entitled individuals who were leeching onto the father and grandfather who had really been a self-made man, made all the money.
Yeah, it's like painting their hypocrisy in like really bright colors, right?
Exactly. And when you're wealthy and privileged, it sort of gives you, and then talking about class and accusations of one another. Wow, what a privilege that is to be able to sit around and talk about those things in sort of this theoretical framework, as opposed to really getting out there doing good in the world, and as opposed to looking to find out what they're going to inherit, so they didn't have to work a day in their life.
Right.
So I thought it was a very interesting this microcosm of debate about social issues when they're all just really white privileged and taking advantage of someone who really made the money and worked hard to get where he was at.
Yeah, they're taking advantage of him, and they're simultaneously dismissive of Marta, who, aside from like there's one granddaughter who seems to genuinely like, Meg, who seems to genuinely like Marta and like, is apologetic for her family. Though that is kind of a running theme where like they in private are all kind of apologetic about the others to her. There's this line of like, you didn't get invited to the funeral, I got outvoted, that we hear a couple of times.
I don't know. To me, in some ways, I mean, it's an exaggeration like film does, but it is somewhat of a microcosm of real life, where I can think of members of my own family who, an aunt in particular, who's always the first one out there protesting, but she has a house in Cape Cod, so, you have the privilege of being able to do this. And in fact, are you really putting your money where your mouth is and actually going out and doing real things that help real people?
Yeah, there's a big theme about who deserves money in this film,
Yeah.
right? Um, we, it's like, does Harlan even deserve it? Like, we don't really know much about his background other than he was kind of an author who hit big, right? So maybe he deserves it, but the family is like constantly trying to prove that they don't deserve it. Um, although it is notable that like when Marta finds out she's the inheritor, she wants the money too. Like it's not like
Yeah.
wanting money is just for the privileged elite who already have it, right? It's like everybody kind of wants the chance to be that snobby, right? If only we could all be so lucky. Rochelle, did you have kind of?
Well, I completely agree with. I think Bruce nailed it on the head. Um, in my political beliefs, both sides in real life are no different than one another. But I do think that some believe that they're more on a moral high ground than the other. And I just thought it was really interesting that he used that to just kind of like hammer home the complete divide within this family and to use it as a tool to make it very apparent that these people are just spoiled little shits. Yeah. No matter what way you slice it. And I did not feel preached to at all whatsoever.
Yeah, and this is a film with a very predominantly white cast, and I think that this was kind of Rian Johnson's way of sort of addressing that, right? That like the modern liberal director making a movie with all white people, it should at least have some sort of commentary on that, some meta commentary, if you will.
Yeah, and their own lack of self-awareness of who they were and what they were about.
Yeah, it is very extreme.
Yeah.
Just because of time, I think we'll jump to the full spoilers. We're going to talk about kind of the big reveal of who done it and what happens to Marta. So if you haven't seen the movie, I do recommend just close this and watch it again later. It's on YouTube. It'll be there for a very long time, I imagine. So
you do need to have the spoiler music in, I think.
I know, like bum bum bum. How's that?
Dun, dun, dun.
We're still tweaking out.
I know. I can like in this. I'm not very good with this streaming program. It's a little clunky, but it's the free one. And there is a way I can like program in stuff. I just have to like, put the effort in to create something in After Effects. I've been a little lazy, maybe.
Nah, it's great.
You've been healing this country.
Yeah.
I know.
It's traumatizing.
I know.
If anyone is down on themselves for how they're acting during quarantine, don't. We are in the middle of something traumatic.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Just do your
Rant
best.
over.
Just do your best. All right, so we're gonna get right into it. So just so that we can kind of, I'll just lay it out and then we can kind of backtrack, I think, and talk about some of the stuff. So we discover that Chris Evans has done it, or rather, Benoit kind of figures out that Chris Evans has done it. There's been this subplot which we glossed over, but it is also interesting, where she confesses to Chris Evans that she's responsible. He like rescues her from the family chaos, and she confesses that she's responsible for everything, and he's like supposedly helping her get away with it so that she'll share a portion of the inheritance with him. That's like the angle that he's playing, and she gets this message that somebody knows about there's like a Tox report copy. Somebody knows what happened. And so Chris Evans is like, we have to destroy that Tox report so that you don't get found out. All along, he was trying to destroy it for himself. Benoit kind of figures this out when he gets the Tox report. We learn that there is a toxicity report, but we don't ever learn the results of it. And
Yeah, we do.
well, Benoit, we do, but like in the lead up, we don't learn.
Yes.
I misspoke. but he gets the report like right as she's kind of about to give it up, right?
Yeah, right when she's about to confess to the family.
Yeah, she's gonna confess to the family what happened. She's just gonna come clean, because she kind of gets busted. There's like this very silly car chase where her car won't go above like 50 miles an hour. Like she can't run away.
I
Um,
am flipping it.
yeah, he's like, floor it. I'm literally flooring it.
Gloria.
Really should have brought the Beamer. That's a great joke. So he gets the toxicology report and then dismisses the family except for one, and we bring in Chris Evans for a final scene that's just Chris, Marta, Benoit, and the two detectives. And right away he kind of outs Chris as the guilty one, and then we have a scene that plays out to try and sort of prove it, right? And there's some nice payoff here. We learned that there was kind of a witness who could corroborate some information, but she's like dying, right? And if she survives, then Chris is
It's not
done.
murder. And
Right.
So,
Then
yeah.
then it's not murder. Marta can get the result, and we learned that Chris Evans had switched the drugs and removed the antidote. But in kind of a double twist, Marta had given him the correct dosage anyway. Like she hadn't even looked at the labels because she just knew
Yeah.
which one they were.
The
Right.
viscosity of
Yeah.
the drug.
He's like, you can
Right.
just tell you've done it. You know the weight, the viscosity. You know, it's just she's good. He tells her, he's like, it's because you're good at your job, right? So when she sees the mixed labels, she thinks she's given him the wrong dose, but in fact she's given him the right dose. And if they had just called the police, everything would have been fine.
Or
and
the
we-
ambulance, right?
Right. If they just called the ambulance, and so Marta's like thoroughly innocent, we learn, and it's a matter of proving that like Chris Evans has swapped them and then continued to work to like try and get the inheritance, and pin it on Marta, and we get a phone call from the hospital, and it's like, is the person alive or dead? And if they're alive, Chris Evans is done for, and if they're dead, he can probably get away with it.
Other way around.
Oh, yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, other way around. So if she dies, then he gets charged with murder, and then it's like bad. And then if she lives,
Oh, I
then...
thought I got it mixed up because I thought the answer was the opposite.
Well, the thing about it is, they couldn't, because the toxicology report came back negative. They couldn't prove that he actually did try to kill Harlan. So they were hoping to get him on killing that woman.
Right.
So they get a call, and she tells them, which one is it now? Now I've lost track.
Okay, so they get a call, and Marta answers, and so Marta basically makes it out that this woman has lived, right?
Yeah, she says she's dead, or she says she's alive.
She said she's alive. Yeah.
Right?
She lied.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she lies,
Right.
but we don't know that on the phone.
Right.
But it tricks Chris Evans into confessing,
Right.
right? And we know because of another previous setup that the detectives like to record everything. There's just all these like good sort of plants that have been like doing the groundwork for this moment. And then after he confesses, she throws up all over his face.
Yes.
Extreme projectile. I don't know what she had for lunch that day, but it was chunky.
Services.
Yeah. And he attacks her, and we get yet another kind of setup and payoff where Christopher Plummer earlier had said that his family can't tell the difference between a real knife and a prop. And he like attempts to stab her with this knife from the giant display from the posters. And it just is like, it just kind of... So Yeah, so I feel like we can kind of talk generally about the film if there's things that we didn't hit, or
Well, I think that Bruce came out with some really good questions about this part. Where, if actually, Bruce, take it away.
yeah, why not? Yeah,
Well, it started with I love the dialogue at towards when she's about to give her confession, where she actually uses the title of the film, or I'm sorry, Benoit uses the title of the film, where he says, "You're a pack of vultures at the feast, knives out and beaks bloody." So it's a little mixed metaphor with knives and beaks, but still the idea is that they're just all circling around.
mm,
Uh, Trying to get to to take care of Marta so they can get their share of the inheritance, and so Benoit says it's his professional recommendation that the manner of death in the case of Harlan Thrombey is ruled as suicide and the case is closed, and that's where Marta's surprised because she was ready to confess,
right.
and Ramsden says what, and then that's when Benoit dismisses everybody. So what was interesting to me did, it's such a powerful statement. And I was asking you, Rochelle, if it resonated with your view of how the family saw Harlan and how they were circling about Marta, just his lines there.
Not until you said something. Nope. To be honest, that line kind of like went off my back like a toad, and the only thing that stuck in my mind was like it's a plug for the film inside the film. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even think about any significance, and it has a lot of weight. You are a great catch on your part.
Yeah, it is a little bit of mixed metaphor between scavengers and like hunters or something, or maybe they're dinner knives, right? But yeah, I agree that it's a powerful moment, and it's clear that like this is the moment where he actually puts it all together, right? So because he then just takes us straight to kind of the finale from there. So I agree. I like it. I thought it was kind of a powerful thing.
And then Bruce has one more.
Sure.
Well, at that point, I was just asking, were you aware of Benoit's intentions in declaring Harlan's death a suicide? Did it strike you as like, why would he declare it at that point?
I think it's because he realized that Marta was well and truly innocent, and that he I think he understood the stakes, that she would lose everything when in fact she, at least in his view, she deserves it more than the others, right? He kind of makes a moral call on that, so that it's not just about the case, it's not just about the death, right? It is about the inheritance. So yeah, I think that it's just a matter of like, okay, if she didn't do it, then she does deserve whatever was left to her. Right? That's kind of how I took it.
I have to say that part completely like blew me away. Like in the beginning, I already knew, like from the beginning of the film, I knew that Marta and Ransom were involved. Period. To me, it was really obvious. They were complete antithesis of one another as far as character goes. Ransom, I mean, like, it's obvious.
They are the two with the best alibis also, because they're both the two that leave the house before the death.
Exactly. So I was like, these are the fools that have something to do with it. But as far as Benoit declaring that his death was a suicide, that, like, shocked the shit out of me.
Yeah.
I was like...
Because it was such surety there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And, it's my considered opinion when Marta threw up on Ransom that she probably had a double chicken.
Oh, yeah. Dobo chicken. Yeah. Sounds good.
It smells good, you guys.
Don't lie to anyone later, Rochelle. She's cooking. She's cooking over
Promise.
Yeah, and I also just kind of want to go over some of the humor. Like, how did you guys like sort of the humor in this movie? Rian Johnson's got kind of an interesting sense of humor, and I'm wondering like if that landed with you. We haven't gotten to the
joke. I loved every single one. I mean, the vomit gag, although it like rubbed me the wrong way at first, but that's just because of my own physiology. Like, I loved it. I typically really like jokes like that will just make me uncomfortable. And then the donut speech was my favorite. thing.
The donut speech is wonderfully ridiculous. I do believe we had a donut poster, right? We had some donut posters.
We had a few of them.
Yeah. The hole within the hole. And our donut is not whole. I also like that joke. I just kind of liked how serious he plays the line. Like, you know, he's just like so fixated on this metaphor. Like he comes up with it earlier. He's like, "There's a hole in our donut." Because we had learned earlier in the film, I glossed over this, that he didn't know who hired him. And it turns out it was Chris Evans because he was part of his plot to like cover up. But it was always this big question of like, okay, why is he even on the case?
Right.
Yeah, totally. My favorite line within that donut monologue was a donut hole in the donut hole.
In the donut's hole. Our donut is not whole. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's so ridiculous. Yeah, I thought there was a lot of good humor in this movie. You know, the projectile vomit is so silly. You know, it's like I can see it possibly undercutting some of the seriousness, but the movie doesn't really take itself ultra seriously, does
Right.
it?
It's
Yeah.
not like Jojo Rabbit last week where like we needed those splashes of satirical humor to like break up that awful story.
Yeah.
You know?
I think he was just kind of doing everything possible to spice up something that's been done just, you know, ad infinitum. Like there's so many whodunits out there and they're so well known that like we know the tropes, like we have shows on every single day that do new whodunit cases, every procedural basically. So it's like how do you kind of keep it fresh? And I think that like for me the big thing was like the switch of stakes to Marta. For me that was the most refreshing element, but like clearly he's going out of his way to like you know, add commentary, add humor, and just like make the characters very charactery and very fleshed out.
Yeah.
So
What was your favorite joke, Bruce?
Oh gosh, you know what? I enjoyed the humor throughout the film. There's like not one that's jumping in my mind right now, but I just enjoyed the humor throughout the film.
I feel like we covered some of my favorites already. But yeah, it's just an interesting tone that the film takes. Like we weren't sure what to call it, you know, at the beginning, a drama or a comedy or a thriller. It's got little elements of each.
Sorry, John. I was just thinking, Rochelle. Actually, we were talking about it earlier. I just love the eat shit scene.
Yes.
Oh, that's right.
Sitting there, yeah.
Eat shit.
Eat shit. Eat shit. You definitely eat shit. And then when I caught then the reply being from Don Johnson is that I'm not going to eat one iota of shit.
Look at you, one iota. Like he takes it so seriously.
So seriously. Yeah.
So offended.
Like, what an eloquent way to put it.
Yes.
I'm not going to eat one iota of sugar.
Yeah. Performances I felt were strong, just kind of across the board. I do think that the pacing of the movie was good. I know you had some issues with the opening sequence, Rochelle, but for one, I really like the pacing, and you know, kind of just it felt like the movie breezed by, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like there was enough tension, especially in the middle of the movie, where a lot of films kind of lose tension in that kind of fun and games section of the film, and I felt like that's where the movie was the most tense, where we kind of had the least amount of information, and there were kind of these questions of like, is she guilty? You know, does she deserve to get away with it? Things like that. So, you know, I really appreciated just a lot of aspects of this film.
Completely.
John, do you want to mention about the whole coffee cup thing at the beginning and then closing
Oh,
it
yeah.
down?
Yeah, opening my house,
My rules.
my rules, my coffee. Right?
Yeah.
The giant mug.
Yeah.
And that ending shot with her on the balcony looking down at the family.
Wasn't she in his robe or something?
She might have been.
I
She
think
was
she
in
had
a
a blanket
robe.
over.
Yeah, she had. Yeah, I think it was just a blanket,
Yeah.
like a.
folding
I
the
loved
cup.
that. I loved that shot at the end. I was like, woo! You go,
Looking
Ana de
down.
Armas.
Yeah, and like Jamie Lee Curtis has kind of like I mentioned earlier, she has a bit of an arc where she has an interesting look on her face. I was trying to just like get a read on like what her character makes of the result of things, because she's portrayed as the one who kind of is the most self-sufficient in the family.
Yes. Right.
So like would be the least affected by Marta getting everything. But there is this kind of sense that like, you know, it's almost like a nod to her victory. You know, kind of moment, just like a all right, good work at the end of the day. All right, any final thoughts before we wrap? I just want to wrap. We've been a little over an hour, so
I just want to say something that's real quick, and you actually wrote it down, John. Was the you did this versus Hugh did this.
that's right. This was one of the few things that bugged me in the film. We've been praising this film a lot. But we get the witness, and she looks straight at Marta. She's like about to go to the hospital. She's like dying or whatever. And or whatever. And she says very clearly, "You did this." And there's a very kind of subtle setup to the fact that Chris Evans' character's name is Hugh, and that nobody calls him Hugh. They all call him Ransom, except the help. He makes the help call him Hugh. So it is set up in there. Like when he first walks in, everyone calls him Ransom, and there's like an actual maid who calls him Hugh. And it's very like kind of easy to miss, I would say. And that's not the part that bothered me. The part that bothered me is that they flash back to him. They're like, she didn't say you did this. She said Hugh did this. And like, this was the second time I went through this movie, and I was paying attention, and it really sounds like she said you. Like, I did not catch a soft H in there. It just felt a little flimsy.
I agree. I was trying to write it off like, okay, she was dying.
Yeah.
You know,
Also
like,
somewhat inconsequential, right? Like, it didn't really wind... Like, even without that line, her character could have served the same purpose of, like, knowing. But I guess the idea is that Marta had told Daniel Craig what she said, and so he was kind of, I guess, clockworking it to be like, why would she say you did this when it's Hugh? So yeah, there was that. That was something that just kind of I was like, I wasn't crazy about.
wah, wah, wah. But loved it.
Yeah.
And one more time, Anna, I'm your new biggest fan.
Yeah, Ana de Armas she like steals the show. She's really endearing.
Yes, she is.
She has a very strange character, but she sells it. I think she sells it really good. Really well, rather.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, all in all, it seems like we liked it. I think this film had some good talking points in it. I'm really happy we went with this one. I'll say thank you for joining us right now, Bruce. And
Thank you, Bruce. We love
yeah,
having you.
yeah, you're a great guest. I hope
Anytime.
you come on. I hope you come on again soon.
Well, thank you. Anytime.
Yeah, we like your insight, and it's very different from ours in general. So it's good.
Because there's like, what, 45, 50 years between us. Something.
Yeah, something like that. It makes a little difference. I don't think it's that big, actually. I think you're exaggerating. I don't think you're Christopher Plummer's age. But okay, but I wanted to reveal our film for next week. So we've been quarantining for some time now, and I think that the further into this we get, the more relatable this next movie becomes. Next week we'll be watching Groundhog's Day. It's currently available on Netflix as of this broadcast.
Good choice.
And I think it's time. We didn't want to start heavy with the coronavirus themed films, but we
will not be doing Contagion, just so everyone knows.
yeah, not doing Contagion.
Too soon.
Yeah, too down. But I feel like this is a movie that's becoming just increasingly relatable. So we're gonna talk about Groundhog's Day next week. So go out on Netflix, watch it, party watch it, however the
Yeah.
kids do it these days. Don't forget to follow our show on Twitter and Instagram. The Instagram is now very officially at Views in Paradox. It matches the Twitter. We don't have any Twitter followers yet because we haven't really been promoting it much. So if you're listening to this and you use Twitter, yeah, go to Twitter and subscribe.
I will.
Bruce, you want to tell us where they can find you if there's anything that you happen to want to promote or anything like that?
Oh, you can find me on IMDb if you search for my name. So that's a good place.
And I've got your Twitter on the screen.
Oh, you got my Twitter there too. Yeah, you can follow me there as well. And
your Insta.
What's that?
Your Instagram.
And my Instagram, yes, as well.
Is that the same? I'm sorry, I took off the Instagram logo from your thingy. Rochelle, where can the people find you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram at Rochelle Racine, linked below, or on Twitter at Rochelle. I had to think about that.
I know. It's on the screen.
Yeah, it's on the screen. I have a long name. It's hard to get the same name everywhere. And then just make sure, as far as you following Views on Paradox on Instagram, please start getting involved in the conversation. You can either do it in the comments of our post or even in the DMs. And let's say you want to request a movie, send us a DM. We're happy to check out anything that you guys want to see.
Yeah, we're up for consideration. As long as you get us before broadcast, it could be announced on the next show.
Exactly.
Great. I am at John and Paradox on Twitter and Instagram. I don't really use the Twitter, but it'd be fun if I logged in and I had a bunch of extra followers. Go to the Instagram. I think our Instagram's pretty fun. We've been putting up alternate posters, which is something I've been a fan of for a long time. And not every movie has great ones, but most films that we've picked have some pretty damn good artwork that people have made.
To the point of controversial.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Lots of controversy on our last episode. All right. I'm at John and Paradox. There's no H in that. And this has been Views in Paradox. Is there anything I'm forgetting to tell people? Like and subscribe. Hit the bell if you want to get the notification.
Set the bell to all.
Yeah. Give us a thumbs up. It helps our algorithm. And
or you can give us a thumbs down. That helps it too.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully you be honest. Just give us a thumb.
But if you want to hate, just know you're still helping.
Yeah. Give us an honest thumb up or down. Just so that it kind of hopefully, incept somebody who's been watching a lot of movie reviews or podcasts, things like that. Maybe we can spread out to some unknowns. But we appreciate everyone for watching. This has been episode 4 of Views in Paradox.
That's a wrap.
The wrap cut.
And
Wait,
we're done.